All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to CCI Haronia's Lunch and Learn webinars. I'm Sonja Hodis, your moderator today. I'm also a condo lawyer, and joining me today we have Kevin Shaw from Scion Corp, Jennifer Hogan from Pretium Engineering, Eric Gonneau from Pearl Clean Property Restoration, and Shawn Trudel from Brown and Beatty Building Science Engineering. So today we are going to pay tribute to Mother Nature, although she's not giving us a very nice weekend to celebrate her coming up, but she has the ability to throw all different types of weather our way and different climate issues. And we've been seeing a huge change in climate patterns over the years. And as a result, condominiums are having to change how they're dealing with their buildings and their properties in order to adapt to the environment that's around us. And sometimes the things that we are getting thrown by Mother Nature are not very nice. And if we can just think back to the ice storm in March of 2025 or the wildfires this past summer, all of these natural events can cause disasters for those having to live through them. But out of every disaster is an opportunity for change. And Mother Nature has a way of teaching us lessons. So if we actually pay attention to her, we can figure out what we should and should be doing. But not all of us have that ability to do so, but we are so lucky today because we have a group of engineers and building science specialists joining us, and they have definitely paid attention. And they're going to translate those lessons into practical and understandable advice for all of us so that we can better protect our buildings and properties. So during the next hour, you're going to hear from them. They're going to be providing their thoughts and tips on how condominiums can deal with ice, water, extreme temperatures, and a variety of issues each season as Mother Nature gives us what she has to offer. So if you can't get all their advice down fast enough, I don't want you to worry because as always, today's webinar is being recorded and you're going to be able to watch the recording in the next 7 to 10 days, either on our website, cciharonia.com, or you can catch us on our YouTube channel. Also, if you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A box. Our panel is going to try their very, very best to get those questions answered during the webinar. So just stick them into the Q&A box. We will try and answer them. And if you want to reach out to any of our panelists after the webinar, you'll find more information about them and their contact information in the chat box throughout the webinar, thanks to our chat master, Debbie Dale. So thank you, Debbie, for taking care of that chat box for us. And speaking of thanks, I want to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors are the reason that we're able to offer these webinars free of charge to all of you. So thank you to our sponsors, Aaliyah Associates, Condominium Lawyers, Pretium Engineering, and Common Ground Condo Law. If you want to find out any more information about our sponsors, all you need to do is go to our website and you can find their logos on the bottom of our landing page or on today's webinar registration page. Just click on their logos. It'll take you directly to their websites and you can find out more information about the services they offer and how to contact them. So thank you again to all of your sponsors. CCI Haronia appreciates your support. And if you are a condominium manager and you are looking to claim your CMRAO credits, be sure to put your name, first and last name, and your company name in the chat box to confirm your attendance at today's webinar. Please do not put it in the Q&A box. And then don't forget that you do need to go to the CMRAO website and self-report your attendance at today's webinar. And if you're here for the very first time or you don't know who CCI is the Canadian Condominium Institute, and we are an independent nonprofit organization that was formed in 1982. We have chapters across the country, and in Ontario, we have 8 chapters alone. And CCI Haronia is one of those Ontario chapters. Our main objective is education, but we also advocate for condos, and we represent all those involved in condos, from owners to directors to professionals, and we encourage all these stakeholders to work together. So if you want to become a member of CCI, you can join us online on our website, or if you're interested in joining another chapter that's close to you, you can find chapter information on our national website at cci.ca. And while you're on the national website, you can also check out the Resource Center, which has a great deal of material that is available related to condo issues. And those materials have been collated from across the country from our various chapters. It's a great resource. You can also access that resource center from the CCI Haronia website as well. And don't forget, CCI Huronia is on Facebook, so make sure you follow and like us. You can always find out about our upcoming events. We're also on LinkedIn, and we are uh, also on YouTube. So we would really love to grow our subscriber list on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. And when you watch any of our videos, make sure to give us a thumbs up and share those videos with anyone who you think will benefit from those videos. And if you want to take a look at our newsletter, our chapter newsletter, you can always find a copy of Condo Buzz on our website, ccihuronia.com. All right, so before we get started, just a reminder to those who are condo directors, if you are a condo director and you want to use the protection of Section 37 of the Condo Act, you do need to get an opinion about your specific fact situation from your own professionals. The information being provided today during this webinar is general information, and it may not apply to your specific fact situation. So this webinar is not intended to provide you with opinions that would protect you under Section 37 of the Act. So make sure you talk to your own professionals. And in addition, since this webinar is being recorded, if you are watching this webinar at a later date, the information in this webinar is current as of October 17th, 2025. And again, as things change, make sure you're contacting your professionals to make sure that the information is still applicable to your situation. And if you're watching us from out of the province, all references to legislation or the Condo Act are references to Ontario legislation. All right, so let's get started. And Kevin Shaw is going to start us off. And Kevin, what are your tips on how we should deal with Mother Nature's ability to throw ice storms our way and create ice situations? Kevin?
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sonja. Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for joining us here. Yes, I'm going to kick off by talking about a couple of issues that do arise when Mother Nature decides to throw her worst at us for the wintertime. So it is coming soon, and it's always good to be prepared ahead of time. So a couple of things I'm going to be talking about is ice damming or icicle buildup issues that occur normally for low-rise buildings at the outer eaves, and about heavy snow loads. And as we did see with Mother Nature over the last few years, despite overall global warming, we're not getting less snow per se as Ontarians. We had a pretty tough winter last year. I know I was out with snowblower quite a bit. And the other thing we have constantly going is our yo-yo of temperatures. So just looking back at last January and February, we were anywhere from about +5 to about -18 depending what day of the week it was, and sometimes that's back to back. And those conditions aren't best for us when it comes to ice problems. So let's start off with ice damming or icicle buildup at the eaves. So this is an issue with sloped roofing. So typically something you're going to see in your low-rise condominiums, townhouses, etc. And it's a regular occurrence for lots of them. We're getting lots of calls these days from clients trying to deal with icicle buildup and freezing at the eaves and everything that results from it. So it's not unusual, and the amount of snow we're getting in combination with those temperatures swinging back and forth, either from daytime to nighttime or day to day, makes it worse in most cases. So why is it a concern? Well, ice buildup at the eaves and gutters can result in the worst case scenario, which is what's termed as ice damming. And this is when melting snow coming down the roof during the daytime ends up freezing at the outer eaves or your soffits overnight or anytime the temperature is going to drop below zero. And when it does so, it's going to create essentially a dam at that outer edge, which blocks any further water that's melting coming down the roof from getting off the roof. And in some cases, that can lead to it building up the roof, and in some cases, right underneath your shingles. And if there's not an area protected with proper ice and water shield under them, can result in water leaking into and past the sheathing, which could show up in the soffit area itself, or worst case, if it's far enough up the roof, into the unit itself. So it is obviously a problem from that standpoint. The icicle buildup itself is also an issue, and that's in many cases some of the complaints we're getting is just from that, which is obviously the danger of having these things hanging over people's entrances and people's backyards, etc., and the concern that when they do start melting and falling off, that it's obviously a hazard from that standpoint. It's also a constant hazard from all the dripping that happens on a constant basis. You get that buildup of ice and everything at the gutters, and it's going to be dripping away. Um, Constantly. And when that's onto your driveway or onto a walkway, then obviously can end up with serious icing concerns, slip and falls, etc. So can go from nuisance to actually problematic and dangerous at that point. So what can we do about it? Well, we can't control the weather. So we're going to get those changes in temperature and we're going to get that snow buildup. We can't worry too much about that. But we can make sure that our buildings are in the best condition they can be to fight um, this predicament. And so that is mostly going to take place, as I said, in a low-rise building with the attic space. And so what you're trying to do is make sure that that's not contributing to your problem. So while the temperatures might be causing melting, you don't want your house itself or your home itself or your unit causing that same thing to happen from the underside. So that's making sure that you're not getting a huge amount of air movement from the home itself up into the attic space, and that you're making sure the attic space is being vented properly. So if there's any concerns with that, and you've had that kind of icicle buildup before in certain parts of the building or can be all over, then one of the steps you can take, obviously, is to have those areas reviewed, inspected, and determine if you have any of the issues that might be contributing to an overall problem. So in that case, you're looking at a few different things. And just a quick list, it's all the usual things that you probably are aware of are in your attic space. You're looking at insulation. You're making sure there's enough in there and that it's properly distributed. We get into attics all the time where we find that while there might be good amounts of insulation in place, it's often not well spread out. So you might have areas and pockets where it's very low, and that could lead to heat loss into the attic space. The other area we find is the vapor barriers. So you want a good, solid, continuous vapor barrier across the ceiling to the attic space, preventing air movement, which again carries warm air with it if that's happening. And so having that continuous and solid right across is an important factor. You want to ventilate the attic so it's the soffits are the starting point for that. You want to make sure that there are baffles in place down at the soffits, preventing insulation from blocking air movement from the lower eaves up into the main attic itself. And then, of course, you want the attic ventilating out from the top. So you want to make sure that any kind of dome vents or ridge vents up at the top of your roof are clear and able to flow. Simple things like attic hatches. Make sure your attic hatch is insulated, so it's part of the insulated system, and that it's weather stripped, because they can be a huge area for heat loss into the attic space just by missing or damaged weather stripping around the hatch door itself. And then topmost, you want to make sure that any kind of exhaust pipe that enters the attic space is both insulated, so it's not losing heat itself, and is properly vented to the exterior. We're still getting into attic spaces with reported icicle snow damming issues and finding out that the bathroom vent is venting directly into an attic space instead of outside. So some of the simple things that you can do. Now, I'll let you know that those are all improvements. Um, we live in Canada, we live in Ontario in particular. We're going to suffer with these kind of conditions. There's not much you can do to stop it completely, but there are ways you can mitigate it, and that's where we're mentoring those items. So if you are having some issues, by all means, have a look into that.
Thanks. Oh,
Perfect.
are you done, Kevin?
Second
Sorry,
one.
I didn't mean to
Yeah,
I
go
didn't mean
ahead.
to cut you off if you're not done.
Okay, so I just wanted to quickly talk about snow loads. In particular, and this is something that's happening again, last year was a big one, um, where we're getting huge dumps of snow on us and on a fairly regular basis. And the big question is, where does all this snow go? It's a problem for pretty much every site that's out there, and it's gotten bad to the point where some sites have to actually, truck that snow away. So they're looking for anywhere to put these things. Now, what you don't want to do, and that's what you got to carefully plan for, is know where you're going to put that snow. And you're not going to want to put that snow anywhere that's associated with an underground parking structure or an above ground parking structure. As we did see last year, there was a collapse in Ottawa from this very thing. Four-story podium structure had been completely overloaded on the top deck, snow plowed to the point where there was 15-foot piles of snow on one end of a garage structure. right downtown Ottawa, and it did end up collapsing. It took down 4 floors of a section of that parkade. And so you see the photos of before, and you can imagine how big the snow piles were. They were huge. And that was combined with rain, which is the worst thing if you've ever been out shoveling your driveway. It's way better to shovel white, fluffy stuff than it is to shovel wet, thick stuff. So they're completely different in terms of their weight. So you add moisture to that, and you end up with a big problem. So if you are moving snow around your property, make sure that you have a plan ahead of time with your contractor who's doing the snow plowing to make sure you know exactly where it's going to be placed and that it's not being placed somewhere that is over an underground or above ground parking garage. So just wanted to keep in mind as you're moving that all around. And hopefully this year, maybe we'll be a bit lucky and it'll be a little less snow for us to have to deal with. So just to wrap up, yeah, Mother Nature can be cruel. Plan ahead is where the big thing is. And as they said repeatedly in the TV show, The Game of Thrones, if you've ever watched it, winter is coming. We're not going to be able to escape it. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kevin. And that's a really good tip about the snow. Maybe it's a good idea for all of us to take a look at our snow contracts to make sure we've got actually provisions that require people to remove the snow from our property as part of our contractual obligations. So great tip there. Thanks, Kevin. All right, so moving from snow and ice to water, which just is another form of snow and ice, we've got Shawn Trudel with us. So, Shawn, how do we deal with Mother Nature when she throws water at us?
Thank you, Sonia. So there are these massive ponchos you can get for the building. No, I'm just kidding. But I think everyone has experienced a water leak at some point, either reviewed it or it's been reported to them, or they maybe been the recipient of a water leak. But they can cause a lot of damage. Of course, the disruption to everyday life, especially in residential building or residential condo. They can be expensive to fix a leak or the damages caused by the leak. And just the whole process can create anxiety, right? In the moment when the leak occurs, the damages, going through the repairs, having people inside of your units, and then also a little bit of anxiety after the fact. There's often a period of monitoring after leakage occurs, just to monitor the repair and I guess continued water tightness. Now, most people think of water leakage being, the direct result of a failure of a waterproofing system, which in part it is, but there's a lot of, different passive things that can be done to try and reduce the potential for a leakage to occur as well. So ultimately, for a leak to occur, there has to be three things present. There needs to be a fluid, which is in our case water. There needs to be a pathway, so a breach in a waterproofing system or a layer that's designed and intended to control bulk water. And then there needs to be a pressure difference. So there needs to be something pushing that water into the building or sucking the water into the building. So that's kind of the last defense, though, that a building has, right? So the way that buildings are designed, often the water control layer is inside of other layers, and other layers are outboard of it to try and minimize the amount of water that get to that layer in the first place, right? So I think of water shedding is a big kind of characteristic that buildings have or different building features have. And this is kind of the first, I kind of think of it the first line of defense for water control on the building. And really the idea of water shedding features is to just minimize the amount of water that gets into, say, the roof or the walls to that water control layer. So ultimately that waterproofing or water control layer doesn't need to be tested in the first place. Good examples of these or everyday examples of these may be drip flashing. So often above or below window systems, you'll see a metal type of flashing. And that's, intended to try and deflect water or push water away from the wall below. You can have these types of flashings at all sorts of areas on the building. So above and below window systems, at the roof level, at various floor levels, and other overhang locations. You can also have similar flashings to deflect water. They look a little bit different, but at the edge of the roof, so rain deflectors. I'm sure people are maybe familiar with that term in a townhome type of property, but rain deflectors or kickouts. These are all crucial in trying to push or get rid of the water away from the building. Now, some of these, I think the main kind of drawback from these is, in order to work really well, often they need to be kind of large or big or push the water far enough away from the building. So there's to many people kind of like an aesthetic drawback to having a large drip flashing. But from a technical perspective, there's a good improvement when the drip flashing gets, say an inch or larger. And this can really just help get the water a little bit further away from the building so it doesn't have that tendency to wrap around or wick around the flashing itself back onto the building. And often, one thing I like to think about is, when you install or you retrofit your windows or your other flashings to have a longer drip edge, it may look unsightly originally, but I mean it's a lot more aesthetically pleasing than leakage damages or staining on the wall. So that's kind of the way I try and put it or try and visualize it. And then, other ways would be overhangs, right? So we think about kind of a roof overhang. It has a couple different functions, but one of the great functions that it does is it shelters, a portion of the wall, right? So proper and, pre-anticipated design of overhangs can help keep areas of the building dry from direct rainwater, just minimizing the testing of the water control layer. Now thinking about, those ones, those are all kind of passive systems. There's other ones like drainage. Drainage is a great, water control feature that every building has. It could be the eaves troughs at the edge of a townhome or area drains. But I mean, proper quantity of drains, appropriate quantity of drains and locations. And, by location, I mean putting them at the low points, sloping eaves troughs properly to downpipe, sizing it properly. These can all contribute to moving the water off or away from the building as quickly as possible, ultimately just reducing, that direct impact of the water. So I think, thinking about Mother Nature, it tends to test us on the most inconvenient times, right? Just kind of like everything in life. So I mean, getting a big rainfall at the end of the fall, right before winter, eaves troughs, downpipes might have a lot of leaves or other environmental debris, or roof drains on a flat roof. So it's important to check out these areas frequently and often, just to make sure that, when those unexpected massive rainfalls hit or a big snow melt or something like that, that these features can work for you passively just to minimize the potential for leaks to occur. Of course, trying to root back to the beginning where, trying to remove all that disruption, cost, and anxiety that come along with water leaks. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Shawn. So before we move on to Jennifer and talk about temperature control, we do have a question about balconies, specifically about snow loads on balconies. But I'm going to direct this question to Kevin and Shawn, and perhaps, Kevin, you can talk about the snow load issue because you mentioned that in your presentation. But Shawn, maybe you could even just talk about balcony and water issues. So, Kevin, do you want to start off? And how do we deal with snow loads on balconies?
Yeah, we haven't necessarily seen any huge problems with overloading on balconies themselves. Worst case condition is if you have a balcony with a solid guardrail around it, solid wall with a, maybe just a scupper draining, that kind of thing, where the balcony can actually hold the snow on there as opposed to allowing it to shed off or eventually melt and drip off. So to that end, if you are looking at that and you end up with 4 feet out there, it can be obviously detrimental from a weight standpoint, and so should, as much as possible, be watched and if you can, get at least partially cleared. But it can definitely, worst case scenario, end up with melting and a bunch of water that can lead back into your unit. So I'll turn it over to Shawn for some comments there.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think when it comes to balconies, I think of two pop into mind. There's that conventional kind of concrete balcony or wood frame balcony that has a membrane directly on the surface and sheds water over the edges of the balcony. And then there's the balcony. It's like, I think of it more of a terrace where it has sort of walls or short curbs along the edge, and then water is directed to like a drain or an opening through that wall, a scupper drain. So for those systems, from a water control standpoint, they heavily rely on the waterproofing membrane, and those membranes are designed and specified to withstand all sorts of temperature change, sunlight exposure, everything like that. But a big thing that we often see in kind of the restoration world is that a lot of original balconies are designed pretty well level, so there's not a lot of positive slope away from the building. So if there's opportunity and it's feasible to slope those during maintenance or repair work, that's often a good approach. But there has to be site specific considerations for those, because there's other things that may be impacted if you start adjusting levels of things, and you don't always have the opportunity, right? Like a door to a balcony may be very close to the top surface of the balcony, and it really limits the ability to make adjustments. So for those, there is a much higher level of care to maintaining that waterproofing in a continuous condition and satisfactory condition to be that barrier, because it's going to get directly hit.
Right. Thanks, Shawn and Kevin, for those thoughts when it comes to balconies. So we're going to move now from water in its various forms to temperature. And, Mother Nature can give us something that's really hot or really cold. And Jennifer, what are your tips in terms of how do we deal with these extremes?
Yeah, so I'm going to focus in particular a little bit onto our window system, because I think they're one of the systems when we talk about heating and cooling that we're starting to see some really interesting challenges with. So when we think about our heating and cooling loads, typically when we think about it in our climate zone, we consider us to be heating driven. So that means basically most of our energy consumption in a building over the course of a typical year is more so spent on heating the building when it's cold versus keeping it cool in the summer. Now, with that said, now we're sort of seeing these impacts of climate change where, for example, in Toronto and Southern Ontario, we're projecting to experience potentially 3 to 4 times more what we would call sort of like tropical nights. And those are nights where the temperature stays above about 20 degrees Celsius by 2050. And that's really starting to increase our cooling demand as well. So while we're still likely to see our main energy consumption being driven by that sort of heating season, we're now starting to have to make much more difficult decisions on the seasonal balance, and it's becoming much more complex. The flip side to that as well, as Kevin sort of touched on, we're seeing a lot more extreme temperature swings. And so those dynamic temperature swings have impact on all of our assemblies as well. So things like seals and gaskets and frame materials, really any component of our building, they are expanding and contracting potentially more frequently and more extremely than they may have in the past. So when it comes to our window assemblies, whether we're talking about, punched windows or we're talking about floor to ceiling glazing, we're starting to see more and more products come out on the market where we have these sort of ultra low U value systems. So those are really high performing glazing systems as compared to sort of our traditional glazing systems that can help us minimize our heat loss in the winter, which keep in mind was originally like the main driver for us. We were thinking like, we got to get higher performance windows, reduce that heat loss. But what happens on the flip side of that coin is that it then can also reduce their ability to reject heat in the summer. So when we're looking at window replacement projects, trying to balance the solar heat gain coefficient and how much heat we can reject in the summer versus how much we sort of retain in the winter is becoming incredibly complex and challenging. So we see these windows that we originally designed to kind of capture all that solar heat in the winter contributing to overheating in all of the other seasons of the year, the two shoulder seasons, spring and fall, as well as in the summer. We also start to see some things happening in buildings where we get sort of these resident comfort complaints where Units on a higher floor or units specifically that have west-facing facades are reporting overheating even when the building is in heating mode. So, depending on the location of your building, its orientation, we see different types of patterns. And that really goes to the fact that no two condos are going to be the same. Every single one is unique. We need to understand the exposure, occupancy patterns, what the HVAC systems are in the building, and know that what may work in one building may actually fail in another. This is where it becomes really important when you're making decisions about some of these systems to engage a consultant who could help you sort of model your building's heat gains, the shading that's specific to your building, the glazing ratios, like I mentioned. So, how big are your windows compared to the rest of your wall? And really understand the heating and cooling balance to recommend a solution that's tailored to you rather than sort of a generic fix or a like for like replacement. So, for example, a lot of times we hear about things like triple glazing, like we should use triple glazing. Triple glazing is great, it performs better, it insulates better. We should upgrade to triple glazing. Well, that works in some cases, but not in others. So, I actually have a recent project where we conducted some modeling of a building and changing the glass to triple glazing solely to try to like save energy and improve the thermal performance actually had the reverse impact in this particular building, where the triple glazing units, because of their solar heat gain coefficient, were basically increasing how much energy the building was using in the summer to the point where the benefits of it in the winter were actually starting to be offset. So you may not have the same units on every side of your building. You may have different locations for low E coatings. You may have a case where double glazing makes more sense for your building based on the size and type of window openings that you have and their exposure. So it's really important to think about that at the outset to avoid sort of those really costly misdirected investments where it's coming from the best possible place, but if you don't actually confirm, actually, like Sonja was saying at the start of this, that it makes sense for your particular building in your particular case, you could end up with a bit of that buyer's remorse. And we want to minimize that risk of like, we've spent millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. We haven't really fixed the problem. We haven't necessarily addressed the performance issues and the operational implications to our best ability. So there's a few things that you can do outside of like detailed planning for your window replacement project when we're thinking about trying to manage these heat gains. And one of them that's like really easy and overlooked is actually just using your window coverings really strategically. So in the summer, make sure you're closing your curtains or blinds during the day, especially if you have south and west facing windows, and that'll help you sort of block some of that direct solar gain. And in the winter, conversely, during the sunny hours, we want to make sure we open them up to capture as much of that passive heat as we can, and then close them at night to reduce heat loss. And there's even things like cellular, sort of like honeycomb blinds that are particularly effective actually at adding a little bit of extra insulation to your window year round that can be considered for your property. The other piece of this is maintaining window seals. So we want to make sure we're inspecting and cleaning weather stripping and caulking and gaskets at least once a year. Even small air leaks can really increase heating and cooling loads, and they create a lot of comfort issues for anyone sitting near the glass. So you want to make sure that you're addressing those as quickly as possible, and they tend to be really low cost and easy repairs to make that can have a pretty significant impact on overall performance. And then again, you want to make sure that you're using your operable windows wisely. So the number of times where we go to do an assessment in the winter and it's too hot in some units, so they have their windows all open, and it's too cold in other units, so they have their windows all closed, can sometimes be kind of shocking. So obviously, we want to make sure that we're avoiding leaving windows open for long periods during the winter. It's basically free heating to the outdoor environment at that point. And then in the summer, anywhere where you have an opportunity to open windows that can create cross ventilation by sort of like opening windows on opposite sides of a suite or on opposite ends of it, or combining opening windows with fans to help direct some of that circulation can really, really help, particularly if you do it early in the morning or after the sun sets when the outdoor temperatures start to sort of drop. And then the last piece of this is to try to kind of manage some of that humidity and airflow within the unit. So while it's good to keep your blinds and curtains closed, you do want to keep a little strip up at the bottom to allow a little bit of either the warm or cool air from the unit to circulate across the glass. And that's going to help reduce some of the risk of condensation. Additionally, making sure that you are using things like your kitchen and bathroom exhaust fans regularly to help manage humidity also is a good way to help reduce potential condensation in the winter. That's it for me.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. And you're right. Condos are unique, right? Not one condo is the same as another. So check with your professionals, take a look, and find the right solution for your condo. All right. So now we are going to go over to Eric, and Eric is going to take us through the seasons and give us sort of a seasonal checklist of things we should be watching out for. Eric.
Well, thank you very much. So yeah, every building that we have, it's designed and it's assumed that there'll be various maintenance checks done and that things are working as intended. And as we all know, over time, things happen and things may not have been as they were originally designed, whether that's animals, whether that's wear and tear or maintenance or whatever, or just plain snow. And it's very important to make sure that we perform regular maintenance on our buildings. And these are the simple things. These is the ounce of prevention versus a pound of pain that comes later on. So in the fall, simple things that we can do. We know there's winter coming. We know that some of us get 2 inches and some of us get 2 feet in a day. And some of us end up in northern countries with 5-6 feet of snow and huge snowbanks and all that. So important to remember that most condo properties do not end at the end of the building. They involve all the property around the building as well. And that's important to make sure that we go from curb line to property line and all the way through. So if you have any areas where you don't want snow piled over the winter, if you have any areas where you don't want snowmobiles running, it's important to mark those out in advance, because there's nothing worse than having a load of snow that's melting in the spring that's going directly into your building. So let's try and prevent that right off from the start. Put up snow fencing, put up whatever blockage you need to make sure that your snowplow operators know where not to put the snow. In addition, it isn't quite for a building, but if you need any no parking signs so your snow operators can do their job, these are just minor things to put up right in the fall, and make sure you've got your no parking signs up and snow dump areas, etc., areas where you know it's going to go. But before the snow arrives, you want to make sure that the leaves are dealt with. Leaves are notorious for blocking scuppers on the top of roofs. They're notorious for blocking eaves troughs. And you want to make sure that those are all clear. Eaves troughs are not mandatory in the building code. They have a double-edged sword. On one hand, they're wonderful for directing water away from the basement of the buildings and getting water away. On the other hand, as Kevin talked about in the very first presentation, if an eaves trough is filled with water, it's going to start the backup of the ice damming and it's going to go right from there. And if you don't have an eaves trough, then you may not get the ice damming. But you can be guaranteed that if your eaves trough is full of leaves and acorns and whatever else the squirrels have placed there, you're going to have trouble in one sense or another. So we've got to make sure that the eaves troughs are clear, the scuppers are clear. Once again, we talked about balconies. Make sure the balconies drains are clear right now. It's far, far easier to clear it in the fall than it is to try and chip ice out in the middle of the winter when you've got a balcony that isn't draining. Whether it's draining from holes in the balcony or whether it's draining off the edge and it's pushing out there, just make sure that your balconies can drain and do what they're supposed to do. So, that's the fall. That's where we're going into. That's where I started now. But all of the systems that we have designed in a building are designed to work. And if there is snow or leaves or other stuff there, then it stops them from performing effectively. Moving into the winter time, from a liability perspective, check your snow overhangs. Do you have blowing snow? Have they curled over the roof? Is it over the entranceway and you're just waiting for that drop to come down on somebody walking there? Check to make sure that you don't have any snow extending out where it shouldn't be. Depending how much snow you have, check for your vents. If you've blocked your air to intake vents or you've blocked your exhaust vents, whatever it is, whether it's a furnace, whether it's a hot water tank, or whether it is a bathroom vent, if they can't get the air out or in, depending which end of it system it is, they can't do their job properly. And in fact, there are reported cases of carbon monoxide poisoning inside buildings because the exhaust isn't working properly for either your hot water tank or your furnace. Other thing, obviously look, if you got too much snow, do you need to do some snow removal? Do you need to, get the dump trucks in and haul away the snow? And make sure that you have all that taken care of in the winter time. Sometimes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Maybe you want to get rid of some of that snow off your property so it's not draining back towards it in the springtime. Because next thing you know, you're going to have water in the basement and your sump pumps are working overtime. You may just want to have got rid of some of that snow beforehand before it all drains in the spring. Carrying on to the spring. Some of the things that should be done in the spring is look for your winter sand removal. You've probably used sand throughout it there. It now can pose a safety hazard if people are on it. It can block curbs, it can block drains. Next thing you know, the water's not going where it's supposed to go. Most people on most properties will probably, especially if they're urban, will have a catch basin. How many of you have cleaned out your catch basin? How many of you are making sure that you've got rid of the sand and everything else at the bottom of the catch basin? Those things are there designed, but if you block the pipe leading out of the catch basin, you're going to have a lot of problems because a lot of things drain into there. You're going to want to make sure that you've done any tree pruning in the summertime. You'll see where there are no leaves growing because, trees, falling branches, they damage windows, they go through roofs, they rip eaves troughs off, and next thing you know, you've got other problems coming down there. Once again, have a look and see. It's not quite building maintenance, but trust me, Mother Nature will make sure it is if you don't take them down nicely and cleanly to begin with. Another great thing to maintenance check in the springtime is have a look at your asphalt. Have a look at your concrete curbs. If you have cracks, if you have potholes, the summer rains are going to direct water under your asphalt. It's going to wash out your granulars. Next thing you know, you're going to have problems with your asphalt. You're going to have problems with your concrete curbs. And these things are a lot more costlier to fix than it is to put a bit of patch out there and a bit of caulking on the curbs, making sure that you get the water to go where it's supposed to go and not between the curbs. One other thing you should be doing in the spring, look for snow, shovel, or plow damage. If you've got a membrane on a balcony or a deck and somebody's been out shoveling, chances are, if you got enough balconies, you'll find somebody who's penetrated through the membrane and now the water's going where it's in instead of off. And you just got to look where people are shoveling. People in the wintertime, they're not looking at the building. They're looking at the buildup of ice and snow and concentrating on that. And have an inspection. Make sure that your membranes are there and they don't have divots out of them from whatever snow removal happened over the winter time there. In addition, now's a great time to look at your eaves troughs and vents. Sometimes over the winter time, the snow and ice that builds up in eaves trough, especially if it's been melting and freezing in the springtime, causes expansion and the eaves trough's off away from the building. It's hanging on by two screws. In the middle, it's got a great big valley in it. These are maintenance items that you want to get addressed then and there before you run into problems. In the summertime, great time to do a fire hydrant check. Most places have fire hydrants if they're a large community. Fire hydrants on private properties are not the city's responsibility. Have you checked your fire hydrants? Have you done your testing to make sure it works? You really don't want to test it out when the fire department's there and they have a reason to need it. Look around, check out how's your caulking. Caulking is a wonderful, wonderful invention when it works. But caulking does dry out. Caulking does get stripped off, whether it's from a shovel, whether it's from a bird or a squirrel that needed to gain access around your bathroom vent or your dryer vent or whatever. We've seen many of them that they try and get up and chew through and get into the bathroom vent or whatever like that. And next thing you know, the nest is there and you've got a problem. So check out your caulking, check out your vents, make sure you've got your screens all in your vents. And the next part, maybe not a building thing, but check out your sprinkler lines, make sure that they're actually working, making sure your vegetation is getting the automatic watering. And sometimes it's a growth of vegetation in the summertime. Your sprinkler's working just fine, but the grass grew above it and now it can't get through. And that's why everybody looks at the dry grass, and it has nothing to do other than the fact that the whippersnipping on the edge wasn't done and everything else like that. So those are just some topics. It's just important overall for condo managers to make sure that we are adequately looking at the prevention side. I mean, we will all gladly do the major repairs, but we can all agree that a little wee bit of caulking, a little wee bit of membrane patching, a little wee patching in the asphalt, those things are far, far cheaper than dealing with the stuff later on. And especially if that means water getting in to the building where it's not supposed to be.
Thanks, Eric, for such a great list of things to do. It's like the honey to-do list for condos.
It is.
So if you were trying to write all that down and you didn't get it, don't worry. We're recording this webinar. You can come back and watch it when it's posted in the next 7 to 10 days, either on our website or on our YouTube channel. And then you can slow it down and get all of Eric's great tips there on your list for things to do for the year. So we have a couple questions that have come up that I want to put to the panel. Balconies seem to be a hot topic today. We had a question about balconies and whether there's any kind of building code requirements for them to have drain lines. Shawn, do you want to take that on to begin with?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Sonja. So like most engineering questions, it depends, right? So it depends on how the balcony was designed. Like I mentioned earlier, I think of balconies, people refer to what I think of terraces as balconies often as well. So often if the balcony is enclosed, typical design could be to include either a scupper drain or an area drain. And both of those would have particular sizing requirements and other discharge location requirements, which might be in the building code or local bylaws. If it's kind of a non-enclosed balcony, it's pretty typical practice to drain off the edges, either into an eaves trough or dripping off of the edge. But it would depend on the type of balcony, I would say.
All right. And is it common for drains to be sort of randomly placed on the balconies?
Maybe, maybe it might appear random. It also depends. It's often depends, but it might appear random where it's actually intended, right? So sometimes during construction or restoration, localized low spots are identified, which maybe were unintended. So a common method to address that would maybe to put in an additional drain, right? So that could be why. It could be other issues, or maybe there's some sort of constraints on the underside of that balcony area that would inhibit a drain in sort of the typical location, maybe some other service or a wall or something. So it really does depend. But often there is a method to the madness.
Right. Speaking of windows, Jennifer, is there any way to prevent window condensation?
Yeah, this is another one of those tricky questions because there's a lot of factors that can go into causing condensation in windows. I think if you're looking at doing a window replacement project in the near future and condensation is a concern that you have, making sure your consultant knows that is really important so that they can look at the existing system and understand what might be contributing to that. One thing to keep in mind is we always want to try to get our window insulation plane as closely aligned with the insulation plane in the wall as is possible to limit the thermal bridging there. And essentially what that does is it's going to make sure that hopefully the interior surface temperature on that window is kept a little bit warmer than it would be if the window is, say, like pushed really far out into the wall assembly. So that's going to raise up the dew point temperature so that hopefully you're not hitting the condensation point as often as you would be otherwise. The other piece to it that I kind of mentioned is the ventilation side of it. So like if you're not doing any window replacement projects and you're having a lot of issues with condensation, understanding how much humidity is in the space and how that's managed with fresh air supply and exhaust into the space can be really important. And understanding where that fresh air supply is relative to your windows that are problematic is another piece of it. So again, it's something that you really have to look at on a case-by-case basis. But if you're making sure that you're trying to keep the humidity down in your space, so for example, like if you're in a condo and there's like 3 of you living there and you are all having showers in the morning, make sure to try to run your fan in your bathroom for a little while after you finish your showers, just to try to flush some of that excess humidity. Same thing if you're doing a lot of cooking, like if you're making a really big, delicious meal, you'd be surprised how much extra humidity you generate in your space without really realizing it while that cooking is happening. So running those fans, not just while you're doing the cooking or not just while you're showering, but for a length of time afterwards, can help keep that humidity controlled a little bit better within the space.
Thanks, Jennifer. That sounds like a great communication piece to tell all of our owners and residents, sending out with your newsletters or email blasts, however you're communicating with your residents, to let them know to keep those fans running when they're cooking and taking showers, because I'm sure a lot of people forget to do that. So thanks for that. I'm going to send a question to you, Kevin. There's a question about basement windows and wells. Do they suffer more issues with rain, snow, and ice?
That's for sure, and dangerously slow because they're located below grade. So we do see that as a regular problem if they are not built or maintained properly. So what you want to have with with any kind of basement window, if it is in a window well, you have a well built around it, whether that's a galvanized surround or an actual retaining wall system or something of that nature. You will end up with a bunch of water and snow inside that well. And as the temperatures go back and forth, it will be melting and at that point, trying to get into your house. Big thing with them is that the well needs to be drained properly. So your well should have a good thick layer of crushed stone in the bottom of it, which helps absorb some of that water and keeps it away from the actual sill of the window. And then it must be drained below that point to your weeping tile system. So if you are having any kind of buildup in a well, and that's the first thing that can be done, is to bring in a contractor or somebody, and they can excavate out the bottom of that and make sure that those components are all there and that they're flowing. The other thing you want is that layer within the window well to be below the windowsill, and well below it, ideally, even 6 inches below it. What we do see on a regular basis is that they're not. The window well is, built to the exact depth of the sill, and any water that goes in there is in contact with your window essentially and wants to get in. So if you are having issues that way or have experienced that in the past, then definitely digging out those window wells deeper would help with that. So yes, it's definitely something to be watching for. Some like to put the covers on the window wells themselves. It can obviously lower the amount of light getting into the well, but will prevent, as everybody's been indicating, Eric and Sean and everybody, when it comes to leaves and debris from falling into it. So ideally you want to keep it as clear as possible and have the least amount of material inside the window well. So you could also look at putting those type of clear plastic covers that go over top of them to shed some of that water.
Thanks, Kevin. Sorry, did you want to add something in there, Sean?
It's Eric.
Oh, Eric, sorry.
I could just add a couple things, and these are maintenance items that just go hand in hand. If your downspout is right beside your window well, make sure it's directed away from the window well, not towards the window well. If your if the pipe that comes out for your sump pump, once again, make sure it's directed away from your window well. As well, when you're grass cutting, don't ever let the people dump the bag of grass into the window well. These are all things that I have seen done. Yes, you wonder why things happen. Sometimes it's a good idea if your window well extends a few inches above the ground. This way, if the water's coming down on the ground during a torrential downpour, it can be directed away from the window well as well. These are all little things that make a difference, a huge difference as you go through. And sometimes it's the simplest thing. Turn the downspout away and away you go.
Keep it simple, right, Eric? Do people actually dump the grass into the window well? I can't imagine that, but
And all the leaves.
I guess you've seen it. All right. We are like almost at the end of this webinar, but before we go, I want to ask all of you guys one more question. And we didn't really talk about air quality and the fires, but you know, the forest fires, the wildfires that we're getting, they seem to be getting worse every year, and the air quality seems to be getting worse. So, what are your thoughts on about what condos can do in terms of trying to manage air quality when we're having to deal with these forest fires that are not necessarily in our backyard, but the winds drift. Mother Nature sends those winds our way. So I'm just going to go in order on how I see you on my screen. So Kevin, let's start with you.
Yeah, we're not well set up for this. To be honest, we don't build buildings with an anticipation that the air quality is going to be as bad as it has been with some of these summer fires and that kind of thing. So, when it comes to makeup air systems and stuff for a high-rise building, its main function is to pull outside air and push it into the building. That's how we design these things. And obviously, when it comes to this kind of condition, is not good for that. It's also not good for other things like cooking smells from other areas and that kind of thing. We've had a few buildings where, the restaurant's exhausting over this side and it's being pulled directly into a makeup air unit and spread throughout the building, sort of thing. So we're not in an ideal situation for that. What can be done about it is a long, I think, an exhaustive um, review essentially process to see what can be done. But I haven't seen a lot in regard to retrofits yet. So I'm not sure if maybe Shawn or Jennifer or Eric have.
Shawn?
Yeah, I think it definitely is well, for the past recent years, it's been very important. Like when the pandemic kicked off, just indoor air quality became the focus of attention in many buildings, many multi-unit buildings or commercial buildings or industrial buildings. And then, with the uptick in wildfires, now there's, keeping the outside poor quality air out. So there's yeah, different approaches, I think, for either. Often, you have different types of professionals or building professionals kind of, batting against each other, right, too, because the envelope consultant's going to focus on the air tightness of the envelope. And then you're going to have, to then increase your ventilation or air exchanges through the mechanical units, right? So it's like tugging on different strings in the design of a new building. And then kind of dealing with an existing building, it becomes definitely more challenging because you're limited to a lot of building systems that are already in place. I think a big one that kind of is coming out is people are focusing on mechanical systems with just increased filters like air filtration systems, higher performing or better filters, and trying to incorporate those into like the makeup air units or other types of units. But then that is also limited to the way that the building as a whole deals with ventilation. So it can be very complex, like Kevin mentioned, but it's definitely a good topic. I think a topic that'll be around for a while until there is a good approach for our different types of buildings and that we have.
Yeah, maybe a topic for a future webinar. Jennifer, any thoughts you want to add on to that conversation?
Yeah, I would say like building air tightness is kind of part of my wheelhouse. I do a lot of projects that really focus on designing and constructing really airtight enclosures and then coupling those with really high ventilation systems that provide continuous fresh air through things like Passive House certification. I will say, so I'm not a mechanical engineer. I preface this with that comment. But I think one potentially sort of like easier step is to have a look at the filters on your HVAC system, understand how often you're replacing them right now and potentially increase that frequency. And then also look at what level MERV filters you're using. So MERV is the minimum efficiency reporting value for filters. So you could potentially look at purchasing slightly more expensive filters that go up to like a MERV 16, which is considered like a HEPA filter, during those potentially smoky seasons. And then in terms of how often you replace them, for like thinner filters that might be more common in like homes, they say you might want to replace them every 1 to 3 months. Thinking about even my home, like I know I don't replace my filters every 3 months. So maybe that's something that I need to even myself think about and go, you know what, maybe in the summer I do replace it every month. It's not a really high cost item. It's something relatively easy for homeowners to do even on their own. So just thinking about that and maybe planning those replacements a little more frequently to help make sure that the air you are pulling in is as filtered as it can be.
Thanks, Jennifer. Eric, you got the last word on this. What are your thoughts?
It's an interesting conundrum we have built for 100 years plus, always assuming the outdoor air is cleaner and better than the indoor air. Obviously, we also continue to have in every building exhaust fans, whether it's in the kitchen or the bathroom, that suck air out. Well, the laws of physics work, and whatever you suck out has to come back in. And if it's not filtered, you're going to be smelling it and it's going to come in. Look at your HRV system or ERVs, depending the size of it. Look to see what your filters are in those, because those are running in the background behind all the time, exchanging the outdoor air in with the inside air. But yes, it is a challenge that we have faced overall. And I mean, in the essence of it, the only way to do it is to make sure that you are filtering the air that's coming inside the house and blocking the air that isn't coming through your filter, whether that's for weather stripping around doors or windows, making sure your doors and windows are closed so that the air coming in is coming through the filter systems set up in the house or the condo or whatever you're in the apartment there. But yes, it is a challenge to be able to do it. And I don't know that we really have good systems and good buildings set up for it. Part of it is let's see what we can do to make sure we don't have these days all the time.
All right, an ounce of prevention. Okay, well, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Kevin, Shawn, Jennifer, and Eric, for joining me today. Thank you to all of you for joining us on our October webinar talking about Mother Nature's lessons. Don't forget that we have other webinars that are coming up on November 21st. We have our Pro Tips and Tricks webinar. This is a great webinar. We've done this in the past. It's been very popular, and we are inviting our trade and professional members to join us to do a rapid fire of tips and tricks. So we're expecting about 12 to 13 speakers. So if you want to get tips from our professionals and our trade people, make sure you sign up for our November 21st webinar. All our webinars go from 12 to 1, and you can register on our website, ccihuronia.com. And back again, our annual case law update for 2025. All of our condo lawyers will be there on December 12th. So those are our last two webinars for this year. Make sure you register and sign up. We also are holding two director certificate programs, one on October 22nd, course 104, and one on November 19th, course 106. And I also, before I move on to what's happening in the rest of Ontario and with our other Ontario chapters, I just want to take this opportunity once again to thank our sponsors, Aaliyah Associates, Condominium Lawyers, Pretium Consulting Engineers, and Common Ground Condo Law. Thank you for supporting our webinars and being our sponsors for this webinar. So what's happening around Ontario? Lots of chapters have things going on. CCI Toronto on October 29th has their AGM and condo horror stories. You can go to ccitoronto.org and register there. CCI Golden Horseshoe on October 21st is having their condo tech talk. Smaller communities start here. You can go to cci-ghc.ca to register. Our friends in London have the Condo Director Course 107, Return Records and Certificate Fundamentals on October 21st, and then they're doing on October 28th Course 108, Repair, Maintenance, and Change Fundamentals. Our friends in Ottawa, CCI Eastern Ontario, they have their AGM and Ask the Experts on October 29th. CCI Grand River is having their conference today. We wish them the best of luck with their conference. And our friends in Windsor are doing the Condo Director Course 103, Budget, Audit, and Financial Statement Fundamentals on November 13th. Don't forget, CCI National is having its National Leaders Forum online on November 6th. If you're interested in registering for that, you can go to cci.ca. So that's a wrap for us today. If you have any ideas for future topics for our webinars or any speakers that you would like to see on our webinars, please send us an email to admin@ccihuronia.com. If you're not on our email list and you want to get on our email list, that's the best way to find out what's happening in our chapter. Send an email to admin@cci.com, ask to be put on our list. It doesn't cost you a dime, and we'll send you all the information of what's going on in our chapter, as well as when we release our newsletters. Don't forget that a recording of today's webinar will be posted on our website in the next 7 to 10 days. It will also be on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so that you know when we post videos. And check out our CCI Huronia newsletter, Condo Buzz, which is on our website. If you are a property manager and you have not got your name into the chat box yet, please make sure you do so to record your attendance and then go into the CMRAO website, your personal account, and register today's attendance at this webinar. So that's a wrap. Until next time, I'm Sonja Hodis from the entire CCI family to yours, wishing you a great weekend. Hopefully Mother Nature will be nice to us and change her plans. But if we don't see you soon, we hope to see you on November 21st when we have our Pro Tips and Tricks webinar. And don't forget, CCI is your condo connection.